Sometimes, the smallest moments contain the most profound magic. On a chilly November morning in London, Ashley Turner stood at the very end of a line that wrapped around an entire city block. The queue had formed well before dawn outside the Harington Apollo, where a special Game of Thrones convention was taking place that weekend. Ashley's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her ticket, partly from the cold, partly from the medication, and partly from the overwhelming anticipation of potentially meeting Kit Harington. The tremors were a constant companion these days. At 27, Ashley had grown accustomed to the involuntary movements that characterized her condition, Huntington's disease, diagnosed just 2 years earlier. The rare genetic disorder had already begun its relentless progression, slowly robbing her of muscle control. Her neurologist had warned her that standing for long periods would become increasingly difficult. But today, Ashley was determined to defy those limitations. 12 hours, she whispered to herself, checking the time on her phone. The meet and greet wasn't scheduled until late afternoon. "I can do this." Behind her, a friendly voice called out, "Is this the end of the line?" Ashley turned to see a woman about her age with a warm smile. "Yes, I'm afraid so. I think we're going to be here a while." "I'm Amanda Gutierrez," the woman said, extending her hand. "Nice to meet a fellow Night's Watch member." Ashley smiled at the Game of Thrones reference. Ashley Turner. "And technically, I think we'd be considered wildlings out here in the cold." As the morning progressed, the two women chatted about their favorite moments from the show. Amanda didn't seem to notice Ashley's occasional tremors, or if she did, she was kind enough not to mention them. It was a small mercy that Ashley had grown to appreciate, being treated as a fan first, a person with a degenerative condition second. By midday, the pain in Ashley's legs had intensified from a dull ache to sharp stabs that shot up her spine. She tried to shift her weight discreetly, hoping Amanda wouldn't notice her discomfort. But standing for 6 hours straight was taking its toll, and there were still 6 more to go. "Are you okay?" Amanda asked, her expression concerned. "You look like you might need to sit down for a bit." Ashley hesitated. The thought of losing her place in line after coming this far was unbearable, but so was the pain. I probably should, but I can't lose my spot." "I'll hold it for you," Amanda offered without hesitation. "Take a break. Find somewhere to sit. I'm not going anywhere." The kindness of strangers had become another constant in Ashley's life. Ever since her diagnosis, she'd encountered people like Amanda, people who extended small mercies without requiring explanations or gratitude. With a grateful smile, Ashley made her way to a nearby cafe where she ordered a tea and sank into a chair by the window, still able to keep an eye on the line. As she sat there, massaging her aching legs, Ashley pulled out her worn copy of A Song of Ice and Fire. The book had been her companion through countless hospital visits and sleepless nights when the tremors kept her awake. Inside the cover was a photograph. Ashley with her father, Daniel Jackson, taken at a comic convention. Years earlier, he'd been the one who introduced her to Game of Thrones, and they'd watched every episode together until his own battle with Huntington's had taken him 2 years ago. Today was for him, a promise kept. When Ashley returned to the line, Amanda was chatting with 2 other fans who had joined behind her. "This is Michael Spencer and Kyle Murphy," she said. "Guys, this is Ashley." The group fell into easy conversation about theories and characters, the hours passing more quickly with company. Ashley found herself laughing for the first time in weeks, momentarily forgetting the constant background noise of her condition. But as afternoon turned to evening, the tremors intensified, as they always did with fatigue. During a lull in conversation, Michael quietly asked, "Are you sure you're okay? We've been standing for almost 10 hours now." Ashley considered deflecting, the question as she usually did, but something about the genuine concern in his eyes made her decide to be honest. "I have Huntington's disease," she said simply. "Standing for this long is challenging, but today is important to me." To her surprise, Michael nodded with understanding. "My aunt had Huntington's," he said. "I know a little about what you're going through. Kit Harington must be pretty special to you if you're willing to endure this." "It's not just about meeting him," Ashley explained. "My dad and we had this thing where we'd watch every episode together. He passed away from the same condition 2 years ago. Before he died, we made a list of things I should try to do while I still can. Meeting Jon Snow was number 3 on the list." "What were numbers 1 and 2? Kyle asked gently. "Visit the actual filming locations in Northern Ireland," Ashley smiled. "Did that last year, and number 2 was to attend a full convention in costume." She gestured to her subtle Jon Snow-inspired outfit. "So this is actually completing 2 items at once." As the line finally began to move into the venue, a new wave of anxiety washed over Ashley. Her symptoms always worsened with stress, and now her hands were shaking noticeably. "What if I can't even take a proper photo?" she whispered, more to herself than to her new friends. Amanda squeezed her arm. "We'll help. Michael can take the picture if you need him to." Inside the convention hall, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Fans clutched memorabilia and rehearsed what they would say during their brief moment with the actor. When Ashley finally turned the corner and saw Kit Harington sitting at a table just 20 feet away, her heart began to race. 3 more fans, then 2, then 1, and suddenly it was her turn. On unsteady legs, Ashley approached the table. Up close, Kit Harington looked tired but was smiling warmly at each fan. When he looked up at Ashley, his expression was open and attentive. "Hi there," he said with a genuine smile. Ashley opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. After 12 hours of waiting, after all the pain and determination it took to stand in that line, she found herself speechless. Worse, her hands were trembling so badly that she dropped the book she'd brought for him to sign. Before she could bend to retrieve it, Kit was already out of his chair, picking up the book and placing it gently on the table. He must have noticed her tremors then, because his expression shifted slightly, not to pity, but to a more focused attention. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice kind. "Ashley," she managed. "Ashley Turner." "Ashley," he repeated, signing the book. "Thank you for coming today. Did you queue for long?" "Since this morning," she said. "About 12 hours, but it was worth it. My dad and we watched you every Sunday. He had Huntington's too before he—" She trailed off, not wanting to burden a stranger with her grief, but something in Kit's expression changed. He glanced at the handler who was gently trying to move the line along, then back at Ashley. "Huntington's? That's a tough one. I'm sorry about your dad." Ashley nodded, feeling the familiar tightness in her throat whenever she spoke about her father. "Meeting you was on our bucket list, his and mine, so thank you for making that possible." Kit looked at her for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He stood up. "Would it be all right if we took a proper photo together?" he asked. Not the standard behind-the-table shot, but standing side by side. Stunned, Ashley nodded. As she moved around the table, she stumbled slightly, her balance betraying her. Without making a scene, Kit steadied her with a hand on her elbow, just enough to help her regain her footing. It was a small gesture, probably unnoticed by most, but to Ashley, it meant everything. To be helped without being highlighted, supported, without being singled out. "Amanda," she called to her new friend, "would you mind taking the picture?" Amanda stepped forward eagerly, taking Ashley's phone. Kit put his arm around Ashley's shoulders, and for a brief moment she felt steady. In that instant, with Kit's supportive arm around her and the camera capturing a moment her father would have treasured, Ashley felt a profound sense of accomplishment wash over her. "Thank you," she said as they finished the photo. "This would have meant the world to my dad." Kit kept his voice low, meant just for her. "What was his name?" "Daniel," Ashley replied. "Daniel Jackson." Kit took the book again and wrote something additional before handing it back to her. For Ashley and Daniel Jackson, who watched together. Winter came, but the North remembers. Kit Harington. It was a small thing, just a few words scribbled in the book, but in that moment it felt monumental. Her father had been acknowledged, remembered by someone who had never met him but had unwittingly been a part of their final years together. As Ashley was gently ushered along by the event staff, Kit called after her, "Ashley, take care of yourself, yeah?" She nodded, clutching the book to her chest as she moved away, giving the next eager fan their turn. Outside the meet and greet area, Ashley found a quiet corner where she could collect herself. Amanda, Michael, and Kyle joined her, eager to see the photo and autograph. As they crowded around, Ashley felt a strange mixture of grief and fulfillment. She had completed another item on the list, another promise kept to her father. But the completion brought with it the sharp reminder of his absence. "He would have loved this," she said quietly, running her fingers over Kit's signature. "I think he'd be incredibly proud of you," Amanda replied. 12 hours standing in line with Huntington's, that takes serious determination. What happened next would later become the subject of viral videos, news articles, and countless social media posts. As Ashley and her new friends prepared to leave, an event coordinator approached them. "Ashley Turner," the woman asked, scanning the small group. Ashley raised her hand slightly. "That's me." Mr. Harington asked if you would be willing to come backstage for a moment. He'd like to speak with you privately. The four friends exchanged bewildered glances. "Really?" Ashley asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, really," the coordinator smiled. "Just you, I'm afraid," she added to the others. Amanda squeezed Ashley's hand. "We'll wait right here. Go." Following the coordinator through a maze of hallways, Ashley's mind raced with possibilities. Had she said something wrong? Was Kit going to ask her not to share the personalized autograph on social media? Her anxiety built with each step until they stopped at a door marked Green Room. The coordinator knocked gently, then opened the door. "Miss Turner is here, Mr. Harington." Kit was sitting on a sofa, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when Ashley entered and immediately stood. "Ashley, thank you for coming back. Please sit down." He gestured to the sofa opposite him. Ashley sat carefully, her tremors more pronounced now from the excitement and confusion. "I hope I didn't do anything wrong earlier," she began. "No, not at all," Kit assured her. "Quite the opposite, actually. I wanted to talk to you because your story resonated with me. My family has also been affected by neurological conditions, and I know how challenging that journey can be." He paused, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar from his interviews that Ashley almost smiled despite her nervousness. "I'm involved with several charities that support research for conditions like Huntington's," he continued, "and I wondered if you might be interested in sharing your story more widely. Your determination today, waiting 12 hours despite your condition, that's the kind of story that raises awareness and inspires others." Ashley stared at him, processing his words. "You want me to share my story?" "Only if you're comfortable with it," Kit clarified. "There's a charity event in London next month. It's a fundraiser for neurological research, including Huntington's. If you'd be willing to attend as my guest and perhaps speak briefly about your experience, I think it could make a real difference." The room seemed to tilt slightly as Ashley absorbed the offer. "I'm not sure what to say," she admitted. "I've never done anything like that before." Kit's expression softened. You don't have to decide right now. The event coordinator will give you all the details, and you can think about it. But from what I saw today, your courage, your dedication to honoring your father, I think you have a powerful voice, Ashley. And in my experience, those are the voices that need to be heard most. Before Ashley could respond, there was a knock at the door. 5 minutes, Mr. Harington, called a voice from outside. Kit nodded, then turned back to Ashley. I have to get back, but please consider it. And regardless of what you decide about the event, I want you to have this. He handed her a small envelope. Open it later. As Ashley left the green room, her mind was spinning. The event coordinator gave her a card with contact information and brief details about the charity event, which she tucked into her pocket alongside the mysterious envelope. Walking back to her waiting friends, she felt as though she were floating, disconnected from the pain and fatigue that had been her constant companions throughout the day. Amanda spotted her first. There she is. What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost, and not the Game of Thrones kind. Ashley tried to speak, but found herself laughing instead, a bewildered, joyful sound that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her. For the first time since her diagnosis, she felt something she had almost forgotten: possibility. As they left the convention center, stepping into the cool night air, Ashley finally opened the envelope Kit had given her. Inside was a VIP pass for the entire weekend of the convention, a handwritten note with his personal assistant's contact information and a simple message. For Daniel Jackson's daughter. Keep crossing things off that list. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. In that moment, standing under the London stars with new friends and a renewed sense of purpose, Ashley understood that today had never really been about meeting a celebrity. It had been about keeping a promise, about honoring her father, and about discovering that even in her darkest winter, she was not alone. Expression. But what struck her most was her own face in the image. Despite the visible tremor in her hand as she gestured while speaking, she looked confident, present, fully herself. I like that photo of you, Kyle commented, peering over her shoulder. You look like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. The words resonated deeply. For so long, Ashley had felt that Huntington's had taken her off course, derailing the life she was supposed to have. But looking at the image, she wondered if perhaps she was exactly where she needed to be, not despite her condition, but in some ways because of it. The third day of the convention arrived with unexpected news. A prominent neurological research foundation had reached out through Kit's charity connections, asking if Ashley would consider becoming a patient ambassador. The role would involve speaking at events, participating in awareness campaigns, and helping bridge the gap between researchers and the people their work aimed to help. They found me through the viral photo, Ashley explained to her friends, still processing the offer. Apparently, they'd been looking for younger voices to represent conditions that people associate primarily with older populations. Are you going to do it? Amanda asked. Ashley's hands trembled as she set down her coffee cup. I think I am. It's scary, but also it feels right, like something my dad would want me to do. As the final hours of the convention wound down, Ashley found herself standing before the main stage where Kit was giving his closing panel discussion. From the audience, she watched him answer questions with humor and thoughtfulness, occasionally catching his eye when he scanned the crowd. When the moderator asked about his most memorable fan interaction, the room hushed in anticipation. Actually, Kit said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall, I had a pretty extraordinary experience at this very convention. He proceeded to tell the story of meeting Ashley, careful to focus on her determination and the bond she had shared with her father, rather than her condition. What struck me, he continued, was the reminder that what we create as actors, as storytellers, it becomes a part of people's lives in ways we can't predict. It connects people during their hardest moments. And sometimes those connections outlive us. From her spot in the audience, Ashley felt tears well in her eyes. Kit hadn't mentioned her name or her disease, respecting her privacy while still honoring her story. It was another small kindness in what had become a cascade of them. After the panel, as attendees flooded toward the exits, Ashley found herself face to face with Richard Anderson, one of the convention organizers. "Miss Turner," he said warmly, "they wanted to thank you personally for what you've brought to our event this weekend. Sometimes these conventions can feel like transactions, photos, autographs, merchandise. But what happened with you and Kit, and then all those people you spoke with yesterday? That's the heart of why we do this. Connection." He handed her a card. "We have other events throughout the year. If you'd ever like to come back as our guest, please let me know." As Ashley left the convention center for the final time, flanked by Amanda, Michael, and Kyle, she felt both exhausted and invigorated. The weekend had demanded every ounce of her strength, pushing her beyond what she thought her body could handle. Yet somehow, she felt stronger than when she had arrived. "What's next on your dad's list?" Michael asked as they waited for a taxi. Ashley pulled out her worn notebook, flipping to the page where she and her father had carefully written their "while we can" list during his final months. "Number 4, she read aloud, "is to visit the Northern Lights." "That sounds amazing," Amanda said. "When are you thinking of going?" Ashley looked at her 3 new friends, an idea forming. "Actually, I was thinking maybe we could all go together. If you're interested, my treat." "Your treat?" Kyle echoed, surprised. "That's incredibly generous, but why?" Ashley smiled, tucking the notebook away. "The foundation that reached out, they're offering a stipend for speaking engagements. Turns out sharing your story has value." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "My dad always said that time is the only resource that really matters when you have Huntington's, and I don't want to waste mine." As they climbed into the taxi, the conversation turning to Aurora Borealis and Icelandic hot springs, Ashley felt her phone buzz with a new message. It was from Kit. "How are you feeling after the whirlwind weekend?" With steady fingers, steadier than she had felt in months, she typed back, "Like I've found my voice." Because she had. In the most unexpected way, through a chance encounter. With a celebrity whose fictional character had meant so much to her father, Ashley Turner had discovered that her story mattered, that she mattered, and that even as Huntington's disease continued its relentless progression, there was still time to create meaning, connection, and yes, even joy. The taxi pulled away from the curb, carrying Ashley toward her next chapter. One that had begun with a 12-hour wait and would continue with purpose beyond anything she could have imagined. 1 month later, Ashley stood backstage at the Royal Albert Hall, her heart thundering against her ribs. The charity gala for neurological research had drawn London's elite, actors, politicians, medical researchers and philanthropists mingling in formal attire as they prepared to open their checkbooks for the cause. 5 minutes, Miss Turner, a stagehand informed her quietly. Ashley nodded, smoothing the fabric of the midnight blue gown Amanda had helped her select for the occasion. The dress had been carefully chosen to accommodate her increasingly unpredictable movements. No delicate straps that might slip, no hem that could become a tripping hazard. Practical considerations disguised as elegant design choices. "You look incredible," a familiar voice said behind her. Ashley turned to find Kit Harington approaching, impeccable in a classic tuxedo. "I'm terrified," she admitted, holding up her trembling hands. "What if I freeze up there? What if I can't control the shaking?" Kit's expression was understanding. "Then that becomes part of your story too. The audience isn't expecting perfection, Ashley. They're here to listen, to understand, to connect." Before she could respond, Michelle Freeman, the event coordinator, joined them. "We're ready for you both. Kit, you'll introduce Ashley. Then after a speech, you'll return to announce the fundraising goal for the evening." As they moved toward the stage entrance, Ashley caught sight of her support team in the wings. Amanda, Michael, and Kyle had all traveled back to London for the event, refusing to let her face this milestone alone. Their presence steadied her, almost as much as the beta blockers her doctor had prescribed for the occasion. The bright lights of the stage were disorienting as Kit took the microphone, his voice confident as he shared the story of their meeting at the convention. Ashley focused on her breathing, a technique her physical therapist had taught her for managing anxiety's effect on her symptoms. "And so," Kit concluded, "it's my privilege to introduce you to someone whose courage and determination remind us why this research matters. Ashley Turner." The applause seemed to swell and recede like ocean waves as Ashley approached the podium. Setting her prepared remarks before her, she gripped the edges of the stand to steady herself and looked out at the sea of expectant faces. "My father, Daniel Jackson, was diagnosed with Huntington's disease when I was 19 years old," she began, her voice stronger than she had expected. "We had suspected something was wrong for years. The unexplained clumsiness, the mood changes, the cognitive slips that he tried to laugh off. But hearing a neurologist confirm our fears gave the monster a name." As she continued, recounting her father's decline and her own subsequent diagnosis, Ashley became aware of something unexpected. The tremors in her hands were subsiding, not disappearing, but diminishing as she lost herself in the story she needed to tell. "Huntington's doesn't just steal your future," she said, her gaze sweeping across the rapt audience. "It steals your present too. Every moment becomes measured against what might be the last time you can do something, the last time you can drive, the last time you can write your name, the last time you can pick up your child." She paused, allowing the weight of those words to settle. "My father understood this cruel calculus better than anyone. So in his final months, we created a list, things I should do while I still can. Not a bucket list for someday, but an urgent inventory of experiences to gather before they became impossible." From memory, she recited several items from the list. See the Northern Lights, visit the Game of Thrones filming locations, swim in all 5 oceans, learn to play the cello, plant a garden that will outlive me. "What my father gave me wasn't just a to-do list," Ashley continued, her voice thick with emotion. "It was permission to live fully in the face of a disease that tries to diminish you, to find meaning even as the meaningless progression of genetic fate unfolds in your body." She shared the story of the convention, the viral photo, and the unexpected community she had found. As she spoke, she noticed several people in the audience wiping away tears, including a distinguished-looking woman in the front row, whom Ashley recognized as a leading Huntington's researcher. "The funding you provide tonight doesn't just support abstract research," she concluded. "It supports time. Time for people like me to complete our lists. Time for children to know their parents before the disease takes them away. Time for lives that are defined by more than their limitations." When she finished speaking, the silence hung for a breathless moment before the audience rose in a standing ovation. The sound washed over Ashley like a physical force as Kit returned to the stage, embracing her before guiding her to the wings where her friends waited. "That was amazing," Amanda whispered, hugging her carefully. "You didn't tremble once during the last half of your speech." "I didn't," Ashley hadn't noticed, too caught up in the message she needed to deliver. "Not visibly," Michael confirmed. "It was like watching someone transform on stage." As the evening progressed, Ashley found herself approached by countless attendees, some sharing their own connections to neurological conditions, others simply wanting to express how her words had moved them. Dr. Melanie Carey, the Huntington's researcher she had noticed in the front row, sought her out specifically. "Miss Turner, the doctor said, her handshake firm. Your speech articulated what many of us in research sometimes lose sight of, the human urgency behind our work. Would you be interested in visiting our lab sometime? I think our team would benefit enormously from hearing your perspective. By the end of the night, Ashley's small clutch purse was stuffed with business cards from researchers, foundation directors, and media contacts. Kit found her as the crowd was thinning, his expression one of undisguised admiration. I knew you'd be impactful, he said, but I had no idea you'd steal the entire show. The preliminary numbers are in. Donations are nearly double what was projected. Ashley shook her head, still processing the evening's events. I just told my story. Sometimes that's the most powerful thing we can do, Kit replied. Listen, I have a proposition for you. I'm executive producing a documentary series on rare diseases and the people who live with them. After tonight, I'm convinced you should be part of it. Not just as a subject, but as a co-producer if you're interested. Your perspective would be invaluable. The offer was so unexpected that Ashley laughed. I don't know the first thing about making documentaries. Neither did I. Before I started, Kit admitted, but I know authentic storytelling when I see it. Think about it. As her friends helped her navigate the crowded exit, Ashley felt a curious lightness. The evening had exhausted her physically. Tomorrow would undoubtedly bring the painful stiffness that always followed overexertion, but mentally, she felt more energized than she had in years. Back at the hotel, as Amanda helped her out of the complicated gown, Ashley caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman reflected there seemed simultaneously familiar and strange, the same features she had always known, but with an expression of purpose that had been absent since her diagnosis. What are you thinking? Amanda asked, noticing her contemplation. I'm thinking that I need to revise the list, Ashley replied. Dad created it based on what he thought I would lose, but I'm finding things I never expected to gain. That night, Ashley slept more soundly than she had in months, waking to dozens of notifications on her phone. The charity gala had generated significant media coverage, with several outlets highlighting her speech specifically. A video clip had already accumulated hundreds of thousands of views online. Over breakfast, she scrolled through the comments, reading message after message from people affected by Huntington's and other neurological conditions, thanking her for her visibility, for giving voice to experiences often hidden from public view. You've started a movement, Kyle observed, peering over her shoulder at the responses. Not intentionally, Ashley said. I was just trying to honor my dad. The best movements often start that way, Michael pointed out, with one person's authentic story. 3 days later, Ashley found herself in Dr. Carey's research laboratory at University College London, surrounded by scientists eager to share their work. As Dr. Carey guided her through the facility, explaining various research approaches for Huntington's treatment, Ashley was struck by the disconnect between the sterile environment and the messy reality of living with the disease. You know what would help, she suggested as they paused before a whiteboard covered in complex molecular diagrams. If you had photos of your patients on these walls, reminders of the people behind the proteins you're studying. Dr. Carey considered this, then nodded slowly. That's actually a brilliant idea. We become so focused on the cellular mechanisms that we sometimes lose sight of why we're doing this work in the first place. By the end of the tour, Ashley had been invited to join the lab's patient advisory board, a group that would help guide research priorities and ensure that scientists remained connected to the lived experiences of those with Huntington's. That evening, as she packed for her return home to Manchester, Ashley received a call from Tiffany Williamson, the documentary producer Kit had connected her with. We'd like to start filming next month if you're amenable, Tiffany explained. Nothing invasive, just following you through some everyday activities, perhaps capturing one of your list items if the timing works out. Ashley hesitated, thinking of the next item she planned to tackle, learning to play the cello. The idea of cameras documenting her struggle with the instrument's precision as her fine motor control deteriorated seemed exposing in a way that speaking about Huntington's hadn't. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "The tremors are worse some days than others. What if it's a bad day when you're filming?" "Then that's what we document," Tiffany replied simply. "The reality, not a sanitized version. That's what will resonate with viewers. But we'll always prioritize your comfort and dignity, Ashley. You'll have final approval on what gets used." After ending the call, Ashley turned to her friends, who had been not so subtly eavesdropping on the conversation. "What do you think? Should I do it?" "The question," Amanda said gently, "is whether doing it would be meaningful for you, not for the audience, not for the cause, but for you, Ashley." It was the right question, focusing her swirling thoughts. Would documenting her journey serve her own needs, or would it merely turn her into a spectacle, the very thing she had feared? When Kit first invited her to speak, "I think," she said slowly, "that it would help me process what's happening, give meaning to the progression, and maybe help others feel less alone in their own journeys." The decision made, Ashley added one more item to her father's list, that night, tell our story in a way that outlives us both. 2 weeks later, she sat in a music studio in Manchester, a gleaming cello positioned between her knees, as a patient instructor named Sarah Snyder demonstrated the proper bow grip. Behind them, a small documentary crew captured the lesson unobtrusively. "Don't worry about perfection," Sarah advised, noticing Ashley's frustration as her trembling fingers struggled to maintain the correct position. "Focus on feeling the connection between your body and the instrument. The precision will come with time." Ashley nodded, taking a deep breath before trying again. This time, when she drew the bow across the strings, a clear, resonant note emerged, wobbling slightly but unmistakably musical. The sound vibrated through her chest, a physical reminder that her body could still create beauty, even as it betrayed her in other ways. "That's it," Sarah encouraged. "Now for the next note." As the lesson progressed, Ashley became less aware of the cameras and more immersed in the immediate challenge of the cello. Each note achieved felt like a small victory over the disease. Each correction a reminder that learning was still possible even as certain abilities began to fade. By the end of the session, her arms ached and her fingers were sore. But she had successfully played a simple scale, the foundation upon which more complex music would eventually be built. "How does it feel?" Tiffany asked as the crew packed up their equipment. Ashley considered the question carefully. "Like reclaiming something," she finally answered. "Like saying to Huntington's, you can take my control, but you can't take my capacity to create." That night, she added the day's achievement to her growing journal, not her father's list now, but her own chronicle of a life determined to find meaning within limitation. Beside her on the sofa, her phone chimed with a text from Kit. "How was the first cello lesson?" "Harder than fighting White Walkers," she replied, adding a laughing emoji. "But I made actual music, sort of." His response came quickly. "That's how all great musicians start, one wobbly note at a time." As she set down the phone, Ashley noticed her hands were steadier than they had been all day. A temporary reprieve she had come to recognize as a gift rather than a false hope. Tomorrow might bring increased tremors, but tonight, in this moment, her body was cooperating. She picked up her father's photograph from the side table, tracing his smiling face with a finger that only trembled slightly. "I'm doing it, Dad," she whispered. "I'm living while I can, and somehow it's becoming more than we imagined." Outside her window, the Manchester sky had cleared after days of rain, revealing a canopy of stars. Somewhere in that vastness was the next adventure on her list, The northern lights still waited, their cosmic dance a reminder that some of the universe's most beautiful phenomena were, like her own life, both temporary and transcendent. Tomorrow would bring more interviews, more medical appointments, more moments of frustration as her body continued its inexorable change. But tonight, Ashley Turner set aside worry for wonder, grateful for the unexpected journey that had begun with a 12-hour wait and a moment of kindness that had indeed become legendary. 6 months after the viral convention moment that had changed her life, Ashley stood at the edge of a frozen lake in northern Iceland, wrapped in layers of thermal clothing as she tilted her head toward the night sky. Above her, the northern lights painted ethereal ribbons of green and purple across the darkness. Item number 4 on her father's list, unfolding in real time. "It's even more beautiful than the photos," Amanda whispered beside her, the awe evident. In her voice, Ashley nodded, unable to speak as emotion tightened her throat. The tremors in her hands were pronounced tonight. The cold always exacerbated her symptoms, but she barely noticed them as the aurora borealis danced overhead. Some experiences transcended physical limitation. Behind them, the documentary crew captured the moment discreetly, having become such a constant presence in Ashley's life that she hardly registered the cameras anymore. What had begun as a tentative agreement to participate in Kit Harington's production had evolved into an ongoing chronicle of her journey. While I Can Living with Huntington's had already generated significant interest from streaming platforms. "Dad would have loved this," Ashley said finally, her breath visible in the frigid air. "He used to say that the northern lights were proof that the universe saved its best art for those willing to venture into the cold." As if in response to her words, the lights intensified, a spectacular surge of color that drew gasps from their small group. Ashley fumbled for her phone, determined to capture the moment despite her uncooperative fingers. "Let me," Michael offered gently, taking the phone and steadying it for her. After snapping several photos, he positioned himself beside Ashley, extending his arm to include them both in the frame with the aurora as backdrop. Looking at the resulting image, Ashley felt a pang of recognition. The tremor in her smile mirrored the one that had been increasingly present in her father's photos during his final years. Genetics manifesting not just in disease, but in expression, in the particular way their faces tensed against involuntary movement. "We should head back soon," Kyle said, checking his watch. "The doctor said not to keep you out in the cold too long." Ashley nodded reluctantly. Dr. Elizabeth West, her new neurologist, had been clear about the importance of managing environmental triggers that could worsen her symptoms. Cold exposure was high on that list, necessitating careful planning for this Arctic adventure. As they trudged back toward the waiting vehicles, Ashley realized how much her life had changed in the months since meeting Kit Harington. What had begun as a simple fan encounter had somehow catapulted her into a role she had never imagined for herself. Patient advocate, documentary subject, reluctant public figure in the world of rare disease awareness. Back at their rented cabin, as the others prepared a late dinner, Ashley retreated to her room for the evening routine of medications and exercises designed to maintain her mobility for as long as possible. The documentary director, Jordan Rodriguez, followed with a single, "A camera, do you want to talk about the Northern Lights experience?" he asked as Ashley moved through her physical therapy routine. She considered the question while stretching her increasingly rigid limbs. "It was everything I hoped for," she said finally, "but also bittersweet. Each item I check off the list is one less thing to anticipate. One step closer to—" She trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought on camera, though they both knew what remained unspoken. One step closer to the time when such experiences would become impossible. Jordan nodded, understanding the boundary. Over the months of Filming, he had developed an intuitive sense for when to press and when to pull back. "We captured something special out there tonight," he said instead. "The way the lights reflected in your eyes. It was like watching someone witness magic." Later, that night, unable to sleep despite the day's exertions, Ashley scrolled through her social media accounts. What had begun as a personal documentation of her journey had evolved into a platform followed by thousands, many living with Huntington's or other neurological conditions, others simply drawn to her unflinching honesty about life with chronic illness. A direct message notification appeared, Kit Harington checking in as he often did. Their initial celebrity fan dynamic had evolved into a genuine friendship, with Kit serving as both mentor and collaborator on the documentary project. "How was the aurora?" his message read. "Worth the journey?" Ashley smiled, typing carefully. "Absolutely magical. Dad would have been speechless. How are the edits coming?" "Powerful stuff. The test audiences were moved to tears." "You're changing how people see this disease, Ashley." She set down the phone, considering his words. When she had first agreed to document her journey, she had worried about being defined by Huntington's, becoming a disease narrative rather than a human story. But as the project progressed, she had discovered something unexpected. In fully embracing her condition publicly, she had somehow reclaimed ownership of her identity. The next morning brought a setback. Ashley woke to find her right arm locked. In a painful spasm, a new symptom that sent a wave of fear through her. Amanda helped her through the episode, applying the techniques they had learned from physical therapists, while Michael contacted Dr. West via video call. "It's not unexpected at this stage," the neurologist explained, her expression compassionate but direct. "The disease is progressing, but there are medication adjustments we can make to help manage these spasms." Ashley nodded, fighting back tears of frustration. This was the cruel reality of Huntington's, the steady, inexorable progression, punctuated by sudden declines that signaled new phases of the disease. "Should we cancel the documentary interview scheduled for today?" Kyle asked. After the call ended, Ashley considered the question, testing her arm's mobility. The spasm had subsided, leaving behind a deep ache and increased tremor. "No," she decided, "this is part of it too. The setbacks, not just the triumphs. If we're telling this story honestly, we can't edit out the hard parts." The interview was with Heather Fisher, a journalist from a major news outlet who had traveled to Iceland specifically to speak with Ashley about the documentary project. As cameras rolled in the cabin's main room, Ashley did not attempt to hide her increased tremor or the fatigue evident in her face. "You've become a powerful voice in the rare disease community," Heather observed. "Did you ever imagine taking on this role when you first stood in line to meet Kit Harington?" Ashley laughed softly. "Never. I was just a fan hoping for a photo and autograph. But that moment, when he noticed my tremor and helped me without making a spectacle of it, it changed something. It made me realize that visibility doesn't have to mean being defined by your condition. Your documentary is titled, While I Can. Can you explain the significance of that phrase?" Ashley's expression grew more serious. "It comes from conversations with my father after his diagnosis. Huntington's creates this timeline, this awareness that certain abilities have expiration dates. So, While I Can became our mantra. Do the things that matter while the capacity remains." "Some might find that perspective depressing," Heather suggested. "Actually, it's surprisingly liberating," Ashley countered. "Most people live with the illusion of unlimited time. They postpone joy, connection, meaning. My father understood that tomorrow isn't guaranteed for anyone, but it's especially precious when you can see the limitations approaching. It creates an urgency about living authentically." As the interview continued, Ashley shared stories about her father, the convention meeting with Kit, and the community she had found in the months since. She spoke candidly about the morning's spasm, explaining how each new symptom required adaptation rather than surrender. "The final question I have," Heather said as the interview neared its conclusion, "is what you hope people will take away from your story, especially those who don't have Huntington's or a similar condition." Ashley considered this carefully. "I hope they recognize that all of us are living with limitations of some kind, some visible, some hidden. And that meaningful connection happens when we acknowledge our vulnerability rather than hiding it. My father taught me that authenticity is worth the risk of being seen at your most fragile." After the crew packed up, Ashley retreated to the cabin's porch, watching as snowflakes began to fall against the backdrop of pine trees. Amanda joined her, wrapping a warm blanket around their shoulders. "You were incredible in that interview," she said. "But it's okay if you need to rest now. You don't have to be on all the time." Ashley leaned against her friend's shoulder. "You know what's strange? In some ways, I feel more myself now than I ever did before the diagnosis. Like the pretenses have fallen away, and all that's left is what actually matters." That evening, as they gathered around the cabin's fireplace, Kyle raised his mug of hot chocolate. "A toast," he proposed, "to Ashley Turner, who came to Iceland to see the northern lights and ended up illuminating others." Ashley shook her head, embarrassed by the attention. Embarrassed by the attention, yet touched by her friend's words. "I think we should toast to all of us," she countered, raising her own mug, despite the visible tremor. "To friendship that shows up when it matters most." As they clinked their mugs together, Ashley's phone chimed with an incoming video call, Kit's name flashing on the screen. She answered to find him in what appeared to be an editing suite, his face illuminated by multiple monitors. "Sorry to interrupt your northern adventure," he said, "but I had to share this immediately. The network just confirmed they're giving us a primetime special to introduce the documentary series. 1 hour, major audience, full creative control." The cabin erupted in cheers as Ashley processed the news. What had begun as a small project documenting her personal journey had evolved into something far more significant, a platform that could reach millions. "That's incredible," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "When?" 3 weeks from now," Kit replied. "I know it's short notice, but they're eager to coincide with International Rare Disease Day. They want you there in the studio for a live interview segment following the preview." Ashley's stomach tightened with both excitement and apprehension. Live television meant no editing, no second takes if her symptoms became pronounced under the stress and bright lights. "I don't know, Kit," she said hesitantly. "Live TV is different from the controlled environment we've had with the documentary. What if I have a bad symptom day?" Kit's expression grew serious. "Then that becomes part of the story too, Ashley. But I understand if it feels too exposing. This has always been your choice, your story to tell or not tell." After ending the call with a promise to consider the offer, Ashley turned to find her friends watching her with varying expressions of encouragement and concern. "You don't have to decide tonight," Michael said gently. "But you'd be amazing," Kyle added. "You always are." Later that night, unable to sleep, Ashley slipped outside to the cabin's porch again. The sky had cleared, revealing both stars and the faint glow of aurora activity on the horizon. Wrapping herself in a heavy blanket, she pulled out her journal, the one where she had been documenting not just her father's original list, but her own evolving thoughts about living with Huntington's. On a fresh page, she began to write. "Tonight I saw the northern lights, item number 4 on Dad's list. They were everything he said they would be, ethereal, transcendent, humbling. As I stood there, I thought about how those lights are actually the result of disruption, solar particles colliding with our atmosphere. Chaos creating beauty. Maybe that's what's happening with my life too. The disruption of Huntington's has created an unexpected path. 3 years ago, I was hiding my symptoms, afraid of being defined by this disease. Now I'm considering going on live television to talk openly about it. What would Dad think of all this, of his quiet daughter becoming a reluctant spokesperson? I think he would say that purpose often finds us when we're busy making other plans. The primetime special terrifies me. The whole world watching as my hands shake. Maybe my speech slurs if I get nervous enough, but I keep coming back to something Dr. West said. Your vulnerability is actually your greatest strength in this role. Perhaps she's right. Perhaps the tremors and the struggles are not things to minimize or hide, but the very elements that make this story worth telling. The next morning, Ashley woke to another message from Kit. Not pressing for an answer, but sharing something else entirely. He had sent a compilation of messages from early test viewers of the documentary footage, people with various neurological conditions and their families who had been deeply moved by what they'd seen. One in particular caught her eye. My 14-year-old daughter was diagnosed with juvenile Huntington's last year. She's been refusing to talk about it, hiding her symptoms at school, pushing away her friends. We watched Ashley's story together last night, and for the first time, my daughter cried, and then talked about what she's feeling. She asked if she could start her own list of things to do while she can. I don't have words for what this means to our family. Ashley read the message 3 times, tears blurring her vision. This was what had been missing from her calculation. The tangible impact her visibility could have for others who felt isolated in their struggles, especially the young girl facing an even more brutal version of the disease that had taken her father and was now claiming her. By the time the others emerged for breakfast, Ashley had made her decision. She would do the live interview regardless of how her symptoms might present that day. She would allow herself to be fully seen, tremors, spasms, slurred words and all, because authentic representation mattered more than her pride or comfort. I'm going to do it, she announced as Amanda poured coffee. The primetime special. Her friends exchanged glances, then nodded with understanding. They had witnessed her evolution over these months, from reluctant patient to purposeful advocate. We'll be right there with you, Amanda promised. Front row in the audience if they'll let us. The final days in Iceland passed in a blur of continued filming, completing the Northern Lights segment of the documentary. Ashley insisted on adding an unplanned element, a visit to the Reykjavik Medical Center where researchers were participating in an international Huntington's disease study. The list isn't just about experiences anymore, she explained to Jordan as they set up the shoot. It's about connection, about finding meaning in the spaces between the adventures. At the research facility, Ashley met Sandra Hansen, a geneticist who had devoted her career to understanding the mechanisms of Huntington's. As cameras rolled, they discussed the current state of research, the promising gene therapies on the horizon, the clinical trials showing modest but meaningful results. Will these treatments come in time for me? Ashley asked directly, the question she had been avoiding since her diagnosis. Dr. Hansen didn't offer false hope. I can't promise that, she said honestly, but what I can tell you is that your participation in this documentary, your willingness to be visible with this disease, it drives funding, awareness, and urgency in our work. You are helping to ensure that even if these treatments don't arrive in time for you, they will for the next generation. It was both comforting and heartbreaking, the acknowledgement that her contribution might ultimately benefit others rather than herself. Yet Ashley found a profound peace in this reality. It connected her to something larger than her individual journey. On their final night in Iceland, as the group gathered around the cabin's dining table for a celebratory dinner, Ashley raised her glass. I've been thinking about why this trip matters so much, she began. It's not just checking off another item on Dad's list. It's about creating memories that sustain us through the harder days ahead. She looked around at the faces that had become her chosen family: Amanda, who adjusted her medications with gentle reminders; Michael, who had become expert at stabilizing her when balance failed; Kyle, whose humor lightened the heaviest moments; Jordan and the film crew, who documented her journey with respect and care. You all have given me something I never expected. When I received my diagnosis, she continued, her voice steady despite the emotion, you've given me community, people who see the whole person, not just the disease, and that might be the most precious gift of all. 3 weeks later, Ashley sat in a brightly lit television studio in London, microphone being attached to her blouse as makeup artists made final touches. The tremor in her hands was pronounced today, a combination of travel fatigue, stress, and the disease's natural fluctuations. She had chosen not to increase her medication, preferring lucidity over cosmetic steadiness. Kit found her in the green room 10 minutes before they were scheduled to go live. "How are you feeling?" he asked, taking the chair beside her. Terrified, she admitted with a small laugh. "But ready, I think." He nodded, understanding the complexity of her emotions. "I want you to know something. Whatever happens out there, whether you speak perfectly or struggle, whether your hands are steady or shaking, what matters is the truth you're sharing. That's what people will remember." The producer appeared at the door. 2 minutes, Ms. Turner." As Ashley followed Kit toward the stage, she caught sight of her support team in the audience. Amanda, Michael, and Kyle seated in the front row as promised. Behind them, to her surprise, was Dr. Carey from the research lab, along with several other medical professionals she had met through her advocacy work. The lights seemed blindingly bright as the host introduced the segment, explaining the documentary, project, and Kit's involvement. Beside her, Kit spoke eloquently about why he had chosen to produce the series, his personal connections to neurological conditions, and the importance of authentic representation in media. Then the host turned to Ashley. "Ashley Turner, your journey began with what many would consider a simple fan encounter. How did that moment change your life?" Taking a deep breath, Ashley looked directly into the camera. Her hands trembled visibly in her lap, but her voice was clear and strong. "I stood in line for 12 hours to meet Kit Harington because it was on a list my father and I created before he died of Huntington's disease. Things I should do while I can, before the same condition takes those abilities from me too. What I didn't expect was that meeting Kit would begin a journey toward purpose, rather than just checking off an item." As she continued speaking, sharing her story with millions of viewers, Ashley became aware of something remarkable. She was no longer afraid of being seen. The tremors, the occasional search for words, the physical manifestations of Huntington's, they were simply part of her reality, neither hidden nor highlighted, just present. When the host played a preview clip from the documentary, Ashley attempting her first cello lesson, the frustration and triumph evident as she produced that first wobbling note, she watched without embarrassment. That moment of struggle contained its own beauty, its own truth. "What do you hope viewers take away from your story?" the host asked, as the segment neared its conclusion. Ashley smiled, her expression serene despite the visible tremor. "I hope they understand that a life with limitations can still be rich with meaning. That vulnerability connects us in ways that perfection never could. And that each of us has the choice to either hide our struggles or transform them into something purposeful." As the broadcast ended and the cameras stopped rolling, Ashley was embraced by Kit, then surrounded by her friends and the medical professionals who had come to support her. But beyond this immediate circle, something even more remarkable was happening. Audience members were approaching, many with tears in their eyes, eager to share their own connections to neurological conditions. "My mother has Parkinson's," one woman said, clasping Ashley's trembling hand with her own steady one. Seeing you on television just now, speaking so openly, it gave me a new way to understand her experience. A teenage boy supported by his parents made his way to Ashley. "I have juvenile Huntington's," he said quietly. "I never thought I'd see someone like me on TV." As she spoke with each person, Ashley felt the weight of the day's stress and anxiety lifting. This connection, this sense of shared humanity, this was the purpose that had emerged from what had once seemed like a cruel twist of fate. Later that night, as she prepared for bed in her hotel room, Ashley received a message from Kit. It was a screenshot of the network's social media accounts, where the interview was being shared thousands of times with comments pouring in from around the world. "You've started something important," his message read. "Something that will outlive all of us." Ashley set down her phone and opened her journal once more. On a fresh page, she wrote, "Today, I completed an item that was never on Dad's original list. I told our story to the world. I showed my tremors, my struggles, and my joy without apology. And in doing so, I found connection rather than judgment. Dad always said that Huntington's took things away, but he never mentioned what it might give. It has given me clarity about what matters. Community with people I never would have met. Purpose when I most needed direction. The disease will progress. That is its nature. There will be harder days ahead, abilities lost, independence surrendered. But tonight I am not defined by what I am losing. I am defined by what I am creating with the time I have. And that, perhaps, is the most important item on any list. To find meaning in the midst of limitation. To transform what could be merely endured into something purposefully lived. While I can." As she closed the journal, Ashley noticed that her hands were unusually steady, a brief, fleeting reprieve that would likely be gone by morning. But in this moment of calm, she felt a profound sense of peace. The journey that had begun with a 12-hour wait to meet Kit Harington had evolved into something far more significant than a celebrity encounter. It had become a legacy, not just for herself or her father, but for all those who lived with conditions that tried to define and diminish them. Through her visibility, her vulnerability, and her voice, Ashley Turner had discovered that even a life shadowed by Huntington's disease could cast a powerful light for others finding their way through similar darkness. And in the end, that light, that impact would long outlast the disease itself.